My girlfriend cried every holiday because her family abandoned her, so I tracked down her parents to reconnect them as an engagement gift, but discovered she slept with her brother-in-law for months, causing her sister to miscarry, and then mocked her miscarriage in text messages. I'm writing this from a hotel room at 1 a.m. because I can't go back to my apartment. 3 weeks ago, I was planning to propose to who I thought was the woman I'd spend my life with. Now I'm hiding from her and trying to figure out how everything fell apart so fast. My name is Trevor and I'm 28 years old. I met Nicole Parker when she was 25, at a charity fundraiser for homeless animals. She volunteered there every weekend, always showing up with treats she'd baked herself for the other volunteers. I was there because my company sponsored the event. We got to talking about the dogs available for adoption, and she told me about this old beagle named Henry who nobody wanted because he had arthritis. The way she teared up while describing him made me donate an extra $1,000 on the spot. We exchanged numbers that night. The first year together was steady. Nicole worked as a receptionist at a dental office and lived in a small studio apartment across town. She'd come over to my place most weekends. I had a decent one-bedroom in Harbor Heights that I could afford on my software engineer salary. We'd cook together, watch movies, take long walks by the waterfront. She was quiet but warm. She laughed at my jokes. She remembered small details about my coworkers when I'd mentioned them. My parents met her 6 months in and my mom called me the next day to say she seemed lovely. Around month 8, I noticed Nicole never talked about her own family. When my parents invited us both for Thanksgiving, she said she had to work. When Christmas came, she stayed at her apartment alone. I brought her leftovers from my family dinner and found her watching holiday movies by herself with a frozen meal. She thanked me and kissed my cheek but didn't explain why she spent the day alone. I asked her about it in January of our second year together. We were walking through Riverside Park and passed a big family having a birthday picnic. She stopped walking and stared at them for maybe 30 seconds. Then she took my hand and said her family was complicated. I waited for more, but she changed the subject to ask about my upcoming work project. Over the next several months, she gave me pieces of the story. Her parents were named William and Mina Parker. She had an older sister named Miranda who was 32. According to Nicole, they were controlling people who made her childhood miserable. She said her father criticized everything she did and her mother took his side no matter what. Her sister Miranda was the golden child who could do no wrong. Nicole said she moved out at 22 and they'd been trying to manipulate her into coming back ever since. She said they called her selfish and ungrateful. She said they made her doubt her own memory of events. She said cutting them off was the healthiest decision she ever made. I believed every word. My own family was supportive and close, so the idea of parents like that made me protective of her. When she cried during phone commercials showing happy families, I held her. When she got quiet on holidays, I made sure she knew my family welcomed her. My mom started calling her part of the family by our second Christmas together. Nicole seemed to warm up slowly. She came to more dinners. She helped my mom in the kitchen. She played board games with my younger brother. By year 3, I was sure I wanted to marry her. She was kind, thoughtful, and fit into my life perfectly. My apartment started to feel like our apartment. She kept spare clothes in my closet. Her toothbrush sat next to mine. We talked about getting a dog together once we moved somewhere bigger. Everything pointed toward a future. The proposal idea came to me in March. I wanted to do something meaningful for her, something that showed I understood her. That's when I decided the best gift I could give Nicole was reconnecting her with her family. I thought if I could show her that her parents and sister still cared about her, she might be willing to heal those relationships. I thought I was being romantic. I started searching for William and Mina Parker online. It took me 3 weeks to find the right ones because Parker is a common name. I eventually found them through Miranda's Facebook profile, which was public. Miranda lived in a town called Greenfield, about 2.5 hours north. She had 2 young kids and was married to someone named Ryan. Her profile showed normal family photos. Birthday parties. School events. Weekend barbecues. Nothing looked dysfunctional or toxic. I found the parents through Miranda's tagged photos. William and Mina looked like regular people in their early 60s. Their own profiles were mostly private, but what I could see showed garden photos, church events, and pictures with their grandkids. I noticed Nicole wasn't in any photos, which matched her story about being cut off. But I also noticed that in the photos where everyone was together, nobody looked angry or tense. They looked like a normal family missing one member. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. I told Nicole I was driving north to visit my college roommate Marcus for the weekend. She said that sounded nice and told me to drive safely. I left on a Saturday morning in late April with the address I'd found for William and Mina Parker in Greenfield. The house was a simple ranch-style home on a quiet street lined with maple trees. The lawn was trimmed. There were flower boxes under the front windows with tulips blooming. A minivan sat in the driveway next to an older sedan. I sat in my car for 10 minutes trying to decide what to say. Mina answered the door. She was a small woman with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater with a coffee stain on the sleeve. When I introduced myself as Nicole's boyfriend, her face changed completely. The smile dropped. She stepped back from the door and called for William in a voice that sounded shaky. William came to the door a moment later. He was taller, with wire-rimmed glasses and a beard going gray. He looked at me the way you'd look at someone serving legal papers. He asked me to come inside, but his tone wasn't welcoming. Their living room was neat and outdated. Floral furniture. Photos on every surface. I saw pictures of Miranda at various ages, Miranda's wedding, the grandkids. No photos of Nicole anywhere, just like she'd said. They sat across from me on the couch and William asked me directly how long I'd been seeing their daughter. I said 3 years. Mina put her hand over her mouth. William asked where Nicole was living now and what she was doing for work. I answered his questions, confused by the interrogation. He asked if Nicole had mentioned Miranda at all. I said yes, that Nicole had told me they weren't in contact. He asked what reason Nicole had given for that. I explained what Nicole had told me about feeling criticized and controlled. William and Mina looked at each other. Mina started crying silently. William told her to go make coffee and she left the room. Then he turned back to me and said something I'll never forget. He said if Nicole hadn't told me the real reason they don't speak, then there was a reason for that, and I needed to hear it from her before making any permanent decisions. He said he couldn't tell me himself because it wasn't his story to tell, but that I needed to know the truth before proposing. I asked him what he meant. He just shook his head and said to talk to Miranda if I wanted answers, but that he was warning me as one man to another that Nicole was not who I thought she was. Mina came back with coffee, but I didn't drink it. I sat there for another awkward 20 minutes while they asked me surface-level questions about my job and where I lived. They wrote down my phone number. William walked me to the door and said again that I should talk to Nicole or Miranda before taking any next steps with the relationship. I drove back home angry and confused. They'd basically called my girlfriend a liar without explaining anything. I thought maybe Nicole was right about them being manipulative. Maybe this was what they did, planting doubt and making her question herself. But something bothered me. The way Mina had cried. The way William had looked genuinely worried. I couldn't shake it. I found Miranda on Instagram that same night. Her account was public. She posted photos of her kids, dinner recipes, and running medals. She looked tired in most of the photos but was always smiling. I sent her a message explaining who I was and asking if we could talk. She responded within an hour and said she could meet me Monday during her lunch break at a coffee shop near her office. I called in sick to work Monday and drove back to Greenfield. Miranda was waiting at a table in the back of the shop when I arrived. She looked older than 32. She had dark circles under her eyes and her hair was pulled into a messy bun. She was wearing scrubs, so I guess she worked in healthcare. She didn't smile when I sat down. I started by saying I loved Nicole and wanted to fix whatever had broken in their family. I said I thought Nicole deserved to have her family back in her life. I said I was planning to propose and wanted her to be there. Miranda just stared at me while I talked. When I finished, she laughed, but it sounded hollow. She asked me what Nicole had said about her. I repeated the basics, that Miranda was the favored child and Nicole felt pushed out. Miranda nodded slowly and said that was a nice version. Then she asked if Nicole had mentioned a man named Scott. I said no. Miranda pulled out her phone. Update 1. I'm updating because several people messaged asking what happened after I met Miranda. I should have seen where this was going but I didn't. The coffee shop conversation lasted almost 2 hours and I wish I could go back and unhear all of it. Miranda told me Scott was her ex-husband. They got married when she was 26 and he was 28. Nicole was 22 at the time and had just moved out of their parents' house. Miranda and Scott bought a small house in Greenfield and Nicole asked if she could stay with them temporarily while she saved money for her own place. Miranda said yes because Nicole was her little sister and she wanted to help. Nicole lived with them for almost 8 months. During that time, Miranda got pregnant. She was working as a dental hygienist and Scott worked in sales. Nicole was between jobs, doing some temp work here and there. Miranda said Nicole would stay home most days and seemed to get along well with Scott. They'd watch TV together in the evenings when Miranda was working late. Scott would make dinner for Nicole when Miranda had her long shifts. Miranda said she thought it was nice that her husband and sister were getting along. The pregnancy was difficult. Miranda had severe morning sickness and was exhausted all the time. She was 12 weeks along when she came home early from work one afternoon because she'd been throwing up all morning. She walked into her bedroom and found Nicole in bed with Scott. Miranda stopped talking for a minute at that point. She drank her coffee. Then she said she'd blocked out some of the details from that day but she remembered Nicole scrambling to get dressed and Scott trying to tell Miranda it wasn't what it looked like. Miranda said she threw Nicole's things into garbage bags and left them on the front lawn. She told Nicole to leave and never contact her again. Scott swore it was a one-time thing and begged Miranda not to leave him. Miranda said she wanted to believe him. She was pregnant and scared. But over the next week, she went through Scott's phone and laptop. She found hotel receipts going back 4 months. She found text messages between Scott and Nicole talking about their plans to eventually be together. She found photos Scott had taken of Nicole that made it clear this wasn't a brief affair. Miranda filed for divorce 2 weeks later. The stress and emotional toll was massive. She started having cramping and bleeding. She went to the emergency room at 14 weeks pregnant and they told her she'd miscarried. The baby was gone. I asked Miranda if she was sure the miscarriage was related to the stress. She said the doctors told her stress can contribute to miscarriage risk but there's no way to know for certain. But she said the timing was impossible to ignore. She said she was healthy before everything happened, and 2 weeks after finding out her sister had been sleeping with her husband for months, she lost the baby. I asked what Nicole had said or done after the miscarriage. Miranda pulled up old text messages on her phone and showed them to me. She'd kept everything, she said, because she knew someday Nicole would try to rewrite history. The messages were from 4 years ago. In them, Nicole told Miranda she was overreacting and that the miscarriage probably happened because Miranda was too old to have a healthy pregnancy anyway. Nicole said Miranda should have paid more attention to what Scott needed instead of working so much. Nicole said the affair happened because Miranda was neglecting her marriage. Nicole said in one message that maybe the miscarriage was a blessing in disguise because Miranda would have been a terrible mother if she couldn't even keep her husband happy. I read those messages 3 times. The person who wrote them didn't sound anything like the Nicole I knew. But it was her number. It was her words. Miranda said she hadn't spoken to Nicole since those messages. Their parents tried for a year to get them to reconcile, but eventually gave up. Miranda said Nicole moved away and changed her phone number. Their parents respected Miranda's decision not to have contact with Nicole, which meant Nicole was effectively cut off from the family. Miranda said Nicole knew exactly why she'd been cut off, and apparently decided to tell a different story. I asked Miranda why she was telling me all this now. She said because Nicole had already hurt enough people and she didn't want me to marry her without knowing the truth. She said Nicole was good at playing the victim and making people feel sorry for her. She said Nicole would probably tell me that Miranda was lying, and I could believe whoever I wanted, but she was showing me the evidence because she had nothing to hide. Then Miranda asked me something that made my stomach turn. She asked if Nicole had ever mentioned wanting children. I said yes, we'd talked about having kids someday. Miranda nodded and said to be careful, because Nicole had told her the same thing before sleeping with her husband. I drove home on autopilot. I couldn't process what I'd learned. When I got back to my apartment, Nicole was there making dinner. She'd used her spare key. She was humming along to music playing from her phone and chopping vegetables. She turned and smiled when I walked in and asked how Marcus was doing. I said he was fine. She said she'd picked up groceries and was making stir-fry. I sat at the kitchen counter and watched her cook. She talked about her day at work and asked about my weekend. I gave vague answers. The entire time, I was comparing the woman in front of me to the person who'd written those messages to Miranda. I didn't confront Nicole that night. I needed time to think. I told myself maybe Miranda was lying or exaggerating. Maybe there was more to the story. But I couldn't stop thinking about those text messages. I couldn't stop thinking about how Nicole had described her family as toxic and manipulative when really she was the one who'd destroyed her sister's marriage and mocked her miscarriage. On Tuesday night, I decided I had to ask her directly. Nicole was at my apartment again. We'd just finished watching a show and she was getting ready to leave. I asked her if she remembered living with Miranda and Scott. The change in her face was instant. She went pale. She set down her bag and asked me what I was talking about. I told her I'd driven to Greenfield and met her family. I told her I knew about Scott and the affair. She started crying immediately. She said Miranda had lied to me and twisted everything. She said yes, there had been a situation with Scott, but it wasn't how it sounded. She said Scott had pursued her and she'd tried to say no. She said she'd made a mistake but Miranda had always been jealous of her and used the situation to turn their parents against her. She said the affair was a brief thing, maybe a month, and she'd tried to end it multiple times. I asked her about the text messages. She said she'd been young and hurt and defensive. She said she'd said terrible things but she didn't mean them. She said the miscarriage had nothing to do with her and Miranda was just looking for someone to blame. I asked her if Scott pursued her or if it had been mutual. She hesitated and then said it was complicated. I asked her if a 4-month affair with hotel rooms and plans for a future together sounded like someone being pursued against their will. She said Miranda was lying about the timeline. I told Nicole I'd seen the messages. I'd seen the evidence. She started crying harder and said she'd changed since then. She said she was a different person now. She said everyone makes mistakes and I was being unfair by judging her for something that happened years ago. I packed a bag and left. I stayed at Marcus's place that night. Nicole sent me 17 text messages between midnight and 3 a.m. She said she loved me. She said she was sorry. She said she'd made mistakes but she'd been honest about everything that mattered. She said her family was toxic for holding a grudge this long. She said I was abandoning her just like everyone else. I didn't respond to any of them. Update 2: I stayed at Marcus's apartment for a week. During that time, Nicole called me at least twice a day. She left voicemails that started apologetic and became increasingly angry. In one message, she said I was just like her family, refusing to forgive her. In another, she said I was a coward for running away instead of working through problems. I didn't call her back. On Thursday of that week, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Miranda. She sounded upset. She said Nicole had called her the night before. It was the first time they'd spoken in 4 years. Miranda said Nicole didn't apologize. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Instead, Nicole told Miranda to stay out of her life and stop interfering with her relationship. Then Nicole said if Miranda tried to contact me again or cause any more problems, she'd make an anonymous call to CPS about Miranda's parenting. Nicole said she had plenty she could report about Miranda leaving her kids unsupervised or not maintaining a clean home. Miranda said none of it was true, but an investigation would still be disruptive and stressful for her family. Miranda said she was calling to warn me. She said she wasn't going to let Nicole threaten her, but she wanted me to know what kind of person I was dealing with. She said Nicole clearly hadn't changed at all. I felt sick. I called Nicole after talking to Miranda. Nicole answered on the first ring. I asked her if she'd threatened Miranda. She said Miranda was exaggerating. She said she'd only called to ask Miranda to respect her privacy. She said she'd mentioned CPS as a hypothetical, not a threat. She said Miranda was twisting her words again, just like she always did. I told Nicole we were done. She started yelling. She said I couldn't break up with her over the phone like a teenager. She said I owed her a face-to-face conversation. She said I was throwing away 3 years over lies her family told me. I hung up on her. That's when things got complicated financially. Nicole and I had been splitting costs for months. We had a joint account we'd opened a year ago to save for vacations and eventually a down payment on a house. There was about $8,000 in it. When I checked the account 3 days after our breakup, it was empty. Nicole had withdrawn everything. I also realized we'd already put deposits down for an engagement party. I'd been planning to propose in June and wanted to throw a big celebration afterward. I'd reserved a venue, paid for catering, ordered flowers. The total cost was around $12,000, most of which was non-refundable. The party was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Marcus said I should cancel everything and eat the cost. But I couldn't. I didn't have $12,000 to lose. My parents had even contributed $3,000 toward the party as an early wedding gift. I called the venue and explained the situation. They said I could get 50% back if I canceled with 2 weeks' notice, but I'd forfeit everything if I canceled later than that. Nicole texted me on Saturday morning. She said she'd taken the money from our joint account because she'd contributed to it equally and deserved her share. She said she'd be willing to talk about splitting the costs for the engagement party if I agreed to meet with her in person. She said we needed to have an adult conversation about ending things properly. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop on Sunday afternoon. She showed up wearing the dress I'd told her looked nice months ago. She sat down across from me and immediately started talking about how we could work through this. She said couples overcome affairs all the time, even though her affair had been before we met. She said I was holding her past against her unfairly. She said she'd been a kid when it happened and deserved a chance to prove she'd changed. I told her I didn't want to get back together. I wanted to figure out the money situation and move on. She said we could figure out the money after we figured out us. I said there was no us anymore. She started crying in the middle of the coffee shop and saying I was humiliating her. I left cash for my coffee on the table and walked out. She followed me to my car and said she wasn't going to let me throw away our relationship. She said I'd regret this. She said I'd realize I made a mistake and by then it would be too late. I drove back to Marcus's place and blocked her number. That same night, she showed up at his apartment building. Marcus lives in a complex with a locked entrance, so she couldn't get to his door, but she stood outside and called up to his window. Marcus told her to leave or he'd call the police. She left but came back an hour later. The third time, we called the police. They made her leave and told her not to come back. The engagement party was scheduled for the following Saturday. I'd invited about 40 people, mostly friends and coworkers. Nicole had invited 20, including her coworkers and a few friends. My parents had invited their friends as well. I realized I needed to cancel the party or let people know what had happened. I sent a group text to everyone explaining Nicole and I had broken up and the party was canceled. Most people were understanding. A few people asked what happened. I didn't give details. My mom called me right away and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine and would explain everything later. Then Nicole started texting people herself. She used a new number since I'd blocked her old one. She told people I'd called off the engagement because of a family disagreement and that she was heartbroken. She told my mom I'd ended things without warning after 3 years together. She told my coworkers I'd cheated on her. None of it was true. I called the venue again and explained the situation had gotten worse. They agreed to let me cancel and refund 50%. I lost $6,000 plus the $3,000 my parents had contributed. My dad said not to worry about paying them back, but I still felt terrible. Marcus said I needed to get a restraining order. I said I'd think about it. I didn't want to escalate things. I just wanted Nicole to leave me alone. Update 3: I'm writing this final update because people have been asking what happened and because I want to close this chapter completely. The last 2 months have been worse than I expected. After I canceled the engagement party, Nicole stopped trying to contact me directly. I thought maybe she'd moved on. Then my landlord called me at the end of June. He said there'd been a noise complaint from my neighbors. I was confused because I'd been staying at Marcus's place for over a month. My landlord said someone had been in my apartment making noise late at night. I drove to my apartment immediately. Marcus came with me. When we opened the door, the place was destroyed. Every piece of clothing I own had been cut into pieces with scissors. My laptop was smashed. Photos from my childhood that I kept in frames on my bookshelf were torn up and scattered on the floor. The furniture was flipped over. Food from the refrigerator was dumped on the carpet. Words were written on the walls in red marker. Most of it was calling me names or saying I'd regret what I'd done. I called the police right away. They came and took photos and a report. My neighbors said they'd heard someone yelling and throwing things around 2 a.m. the night before. One neighbor said she'd seen a woman matching Nicole's description leaving the building around 3 a.m. The neighbor didn't get a clear look at her face but described her height and hair color accurately. The police said they'd look for Nicole but couldn't promise anything. They said I should file for a restraining order immediately. They gave me the paperwork and told me where to go to submit it. Marcus helped me clean up the apartment as much as we could. Most of my belongings were ruined. My landlord said I'd need to pay for the damage to the walls and carpet. He estimated it would cost around $2,000. I filed for the restraining order that week. I included photos of the damage, the police report, and screenshots of the texts Nicole had sent me. I also included a statement from Marcus about Nicole showing up at his apartment building multiple times. The court granted me a temporary order and scheduled a hearing for 2 weeks later. Nicole didn't show up to the hearing. The judge granted me a permanent restraining order for 3 years. Nicole wasn't allowed to contact me, come near me, or come near my home or workplace. I felt some relief but also knew a piece of paper wouldn't necessarily stop her if she wanted to do something else. I stayed at Marcus's place for another month while I looked for a new apartment. I didn't feel safe going back to my old building. I found a 1-bedroom place across town with better security and a doorman. The rent was higher than I wanted to pay, but I needed the peace of mind. In late July, Miranda called me again. She said Nicole had contacted her parents asking for money. William had refused and Nicole had sent him angry messages saying she was broke and homeless because of me. William had forwarded the messages to Miranda to warn her in case Nicole showed up at her house. Miranda said she'd increased security at her home and told her kids' school to be careful about who picked them up. Miranda also told me she'd been in touch with Scott, her ex-husband. He'd remarried and had a daughter with his new wife. Miranda said she'd warned him about Nicole's recent behavior in case she tried to contact him too. Scott told Miranda that Nicole had messaged him a few times over the years, always around holidays or his birthday. He'd never responded but had kept the messages in case he ever needed evidence of harassment. Miranda said she and Scott weren't friends but they'd agreed to keep each other updated about Nicole's activities. That conversation made me realize how long Nicole had been doing this. She'd been fixated on Miranda's life for years, even after their falling out. She'd kept tabs on Scott. She'd probably kept tabs on her parents too. I thought about how she'd presented herself as the victim, the one who'd been cut off and abandoned, when really she'd been the one unable to let go. I haven't heard from Nicole since the restraining order was granted. I changed my phone number in August just to be safe. I also locked down all my social media and blocked anyone I didn't personally know. A few mutual friends of Nicole and me reached out to ask what happened. I gave them the basic facts without going into detail. Most of them said they weren't surprised. One friend said Nicole had always seemed performative and overly sweet in a way that felt calculated. I'm still living in the new apartment. The lease on my old place ended in September and I didn't renew it. I'm still paying off the debt from the engagement party and the damage to the old apartment. My parents offered to help but I told them I'd handle it. They've been supportive without asking too many questions, which I appreciate. I ran into Miranda once in October. I was in Greenfield visiting a client for work and stopped at a grocery store. She was there with her 2 kids. We talked briefly in the produce section. She asked how I was doing and I said I was managing. She said she was sorry I'd gotten caught up in Nicole's mess. I thanked her for warning me when she did. She said she hoped I'd be able to move on and find someone better. Her kids were pulling at her cart so she had to go, but she gave me her number and said to call if I ever needed anything. I haven't called. I don't plan to. I'm grateful to Miranda for telling me the truth, but I don't want any connection to that situation anymore. I deleted Nicole's number from my phone. I got rid of the few things she'd left at my place before everything happened. I'm trying to move forward. The hardest part isn't the money or even the destroyed apartment. It's knowing I spent 3 years with someone who was capable of doing what Nicole did to her sister and then lying about it convincingly enough that I believed her completely. I keep replaying conversations we had, looking for signs I missed. There were probably some. The lack of old friends. The way she never wanted me to see her phone. How she'd change the subject anytime I asked detailed questions about her past. But at the time, I explained all of it away as trauma from her family situation. I'm not dating anyone right now. I'm not ready. I'm focused on work and paying off debt and rebuilding my savings. Maybe eventually I'll be ready to try again with someone else. For now, I'm just trying to get through each day and put this whole situation behind me. If Nicole ever violates the restraining order, I'll call the police immediately. But I hope she's moved on to something else and left me alone for good. That's all I want at this point. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My brother used me as his alibi to cheat. When I told his fiancée everything, my phone blew up with texts calling me a traitor, and he showed up at our door drunk and threatening throwaway account because my main Reddit was set up by my brother Derek and he checks it sometimes to see what I'm up to. I, 16F, never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I have nowhere else to turn. Let me start with some background. My brother Derek is 25. We've always been really close, especially since our dad wasn't around much. Dad left when I was 7, and Derek basically stepped up and became the man of the house. He taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with homework, and even scared away a boy who was bothering me at school once. Derek has always protected me, and I've always looked up to him. Our dad wasn't just absent, he cheated on my mom multiple times before finally leaving for good. The last affair was with his secretary, such a cliché. Mom found out when she surprised him at work one day with lunch. She walked in on them kissing in his office. She threw the lunch at them and left. A month later, Dad moved out and eventually married the secretary. Mom was completely broken for years. Derek was 16 when all this happened, old enough to understand everything. He hated Dad for what he did to Mom and to our family. He cut off contact with Dad for 3 years after that. Now they talk occasionally, but their relationship has never recovered. That's why what happened last week has me so confused and upset. Derek got engaged to Lindsay 8 months ago. They've been together for 4 years, and Lindsay is wonderful. She's kind and funny and treats me like a little sister, not just her fiancé's annoying teenage sister. She never made me feel weird about how close Derek and I are. She actually seemed happy that we get along so well. Lindsay even includes me in what she calls girl time, shopping, getting our nails done, baking together. I'm not usually into super girly stuff, but I enjoy it with her. She's also been including me in wedding planning, asking my opinion on flowers and dresses. The wedding is planned for next May, about 9 months from now. Lindsay and my mom get along great too. They go out for lunch sometimes, just the two of them, and Lindsay always makes sure Mom feels included in the wedding planning. The three of us have gone shopping together a few times, and it always feels like we're a real family. Everything seems perfect, right? Well, it was until about a month ago. It started when Lindsay mentioned something about Derek and me hanging out one evening. She said something like she was glad Derek and I had a nice time at the movies. The problem was, we hadn't gone to the movies that night. Derek was supposedly working late. I was confused but didn't want to make things awkward, so I just nodded and went along with it. When I asked Derek about it later, he got this weird look on his face and said, "Just go with it, okay? It's nothing bad." I figured maybe he was planning some surprise for Lindsay and needed cover, but it seemed odd that he wouldn't just tell me that. Then it happened again. And again. Derek kept telling Lindsay he was with me when he wasn't. I started feeling uncomfortable about it, especially since he never explained why he was lying. If he was planning a surprise, wouldn't he have told me by now? Last Thursday, things came to a head. Derek came over to hang out and watch movies with me. Mom was working late. About an hour into the movie, Derek said he was going to run and get Chinese food for us. He left his phone on the coffee table when he went out. I wasn't trying to snoop. I respect people's privacy. But his phone lit up with a text message that I could see from where I was sitting. The message preview showed, "Hey babe, can't wait to see you tonight. Missing you so much." The name on the message was Amanda. I knew Lindsay was at a work conference that night. And I knew Derek wasn't dating anyone named Amanda before he started dating Lindsay. When Derek came back with the food, I asked him who Amanda was. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. First, he tried to play it off like she was just a friend from work. But I kept pushing. Finally, he admitted the truth. He's been seeing this woman, Amanda, for about a month, right around the time he started using me as his alibi. She works at his office, and apparently, they connected during a company happy hour. He swore it was just a physical thing, that he still loves Lindsay. His excuse? He said he wasn't sure if Lindsay was the one and wanted to explore his options before settling down. He said getting engaged made him panic about never being with anyone else again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my brother, the same person who hated our dad for years because of his cheating. The same person who comforted Mom through countless nights of crying. The same person who once told me that cheaters were the worst kind of people. I wanted to call Lindsay right then, but Derek begged me not to. He promised he would end it with Amanda immediately. He said it would destroy Lindsay and tear our family apart. He reminded me how much pain Dad's affairs caused and said he didn't want to hurt Lindsay that way. I reluctantly agreed to give him time to end things with Amanda. That was a week ago. But I know the affair hasn't stopped. 2 days ago, Mom, Lindsay, and I went to see a movie. Afterward, Lindsay mentioned how nice it was of Derek to help me with my math homework the previous evening. Once again, Derek had used me as his alibi. I hadn't seen him at all that day. I'm stuck in an impossible situation. If I tell Lindsay the truth, my relationship with Derek might be damaged forever. He'll hate me for betraying him. But if I don't tell her, I'm helping him cheat on her. Lindsay doesn't deserve this. No one does. Mom would be devastated too. Dad's cheating nearly destroyed her. Finding out her son is doing the exact same thing would break her heart all over again. Meanwhile, Lindsay keeps talking about the wedding. She's so excited about it. She's already picked out her dress and asked me to be one of her bridesmaids. She's looking at venues and caterers and florists. She has no idea that the man she thinks is her perfect match is sneaking around behind her back. I feel like I'm carrying this huge weight on my shoulders. I can't talk to any of my friends about it because they all know Derek and Lindsay. I can't talk to Mom because it would hurt her too much. I can't talk to Derek because he just makes excuses. Reddit, what do I do? Do I tell Lindsay the truth and risk destroying my relationship with my brother? Or do I keep quiet and let her marry someone who's cheating on her? Either way, I feel like someone gets hurt. I never thought I'd be in this position. Derek was always my hero. Now I don't even recognize him anymore. Update 1, it's been 2 weeks since my original post. First, I want to thank everyone who commented and gave me advice. You helped me realize that I needed to do something rather than just letting the situation continue. Last Saturday, I decided to confront Derek again. I texted him and asked if he could come over to talk. Mom was out with her friend for the day, so we had the house to ourselves. When he arrived, I didn't waste any time. I told him straight up that he needed to tell Lindsay about Amanda, or I would do it myself. I gave him 1 week to come clean. Derek looked completely shocked. I don't think he expected me to stand up to him like that. For a moment, he just stared at me with his mouth open. Then his face changed, and he got angry. Really angry. He called me an ungrateful brat and said I had no right to get involved in his business. He said I didn't understand adult relationships and that sometimes things were complicated. Then he brought up all the times he'd been there for me, all the things he'd done since Dad left, as if that gave him a free pass to cheat on Lindsay. That's when I said something I knew would hurt him. I told him he was turning into Dad. I reminded him how much he hated Dad for cheating on Mom, how he'd sworn he would never do something like that to someone he loved. I asked him what happened to that person, the brother I had looked up to my whole life. That hit a nerve. Derek's face went red, and he started yelling even louder. He said I was betraying him, that I owed him loyalty after everything he'd done for me. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard that a picture fell off the wall. The week that followed was tense. Derek completely avoided me. He didn't respond to my texts or calls. Mom noticed something was wrong between us and asked me about it several times, but I didn't tell her. I felt it wasn't my place to tell her what her son had done. Throughout the week, I kept checking my phone, hoping Derek would text me to say he'd told Lindsay the truth. But no message came. When the deadline arrived, I texted Derek to ask if he'd talked to Lindsay yet. I saw that he read my message, but he didn't respond. That told me everything I needed to know. I texted Lindsay to ask where Derek was. She replied that he was at work and mentioned he was planning to stop by my place afterward. Another lie. He wasn't coming to see me, he was probably meeting Amanda or trying to figure out how to stop me from talking to Lindsay. I made a decision right then. I grabbed my bike and rode over to their apartment. My heart was pounding the whole way there. I kept thinking about turning around, about giving Derek more time. But then I would think about Lindsay planning her wedding, all excited about marrying someone who was betraying her trust, and I knew I had to keep going. When I got to their apartment, Lindsay seemed surprised to see me. She asked if I was looking for Derek. I told her I needed to talk to her about something important. We sat down in the living room, and my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them. Telling her was even harder than I expected. I started by apologizing for not coming to her sooner. Then I told her everything, about Amanda, about Derek using me as his alibi, about confronting him and giving him a chance to tell her himself. Lindsay didn't believe me at first. She laughed and said there must be some misunderstanding. Then she saw the look on my face and realized I was serious. She went very quiet and still. Then she picked up her phone and called Derek. He didn't answer. Then she called someone else. It turned out Amanda wasn't just any woman from Derek's office, she was actually one of Lindsay's friends. They'd met at Lindsay's birthday party last year. Lindsay put the phone on speaker as she confronted Amanda. At first, Amanda denied everything, but Lindsay kept pushing. Finally, Amanda admitted she'd been seeing Derek for about a month. They got into a huge argument, with Amanda blaming Lindsay for not being exciting enough for Derek. Eventually, Amanda hung up on her. Lindsay broke down crying after that. I cried too. I felt terrible being the one to deliver this news, but I also felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The truth was finally out. Lindsay asked me to help her pack some clothes and toiletries. She called her mom, who agreed to come pick her up. While we waited, Lindsay thanked me for telling her the truth. She said it must have been really hard for me to do that, knowing how it would affect my relationship with Derek. She was right, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. When Lindsay's mom arrived, I went home and found Mom in the kitchen making dinner. I broke down and told her everything too. She was furious with Derek. She tried calling him multiple times, but he didn't answer her calls either. The next day, I got a text from Derek. He called me a traitor and said I'd ruined his life. He said Lindsay had broken up with him and that it was all my fault. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. Later that day, Mom told me Derek had called her, asking for her support. She told him he was a grown man who made his own choices and now had to face the consequences. I was surprised by how firmly she stood her ground. I guess Dad's cheating had made her stronger than I realized. Lindsay texted me too. She confirmed that she and Derek were over. She said she might have been able to forgive him if he'd come clean himself, but the fact that he was too cowardly to admit what he'd done and instead made his teenage sister do it was something she couldn't get past. She also said she was moving in with her parents until she could find her own place. It's been a rough couple of weeks. I haven't spoken to Derek since that text. I miss the brother I thought I knew, but I don't recognize the person he's become. I hope someday we can repair our relationship, but right now, the wound is too fresh. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update. I wanted to wait until things settled down a bit before posting again. 3 days after my last update, Derek showed up at our house around midnight. Mom and I were both asleep when the doorbell started ringing nonstop. Mom got to the door first. I followed and stood at the top of the stairs, watching. Derek was clearly drunk. He was swaying on his feet and slurring his words. He kept saying he needed to talk to me, that I didn't understand what I'd done. Mom refused to let him in. When he tried to push past her, she threatened to call the police. He finally left after she started dialing. The next morning, Derek called Mom and apologized for showing up drunk. He asked if he could come over that evening to talk. Mom agreed but made it clear that he needed to be sober and respectful. When he arrived that night, I didn't want to see him, so I stayed in my room. I could hear him and Mom talking downstairs. Their voices got louder as the conversation went on. I couldn't make out exactly what they were saying, but I heard Mom mention Dad several times. After about an hour, Mom came upstairs and knocked on my door. She said Derek wanted to talk to me, but it was completely up to me whether I wanted to see him or not. After thinking about it for a few minutes, I decided to go downstairs. Derek looked terrible. His eyes were red and puffy, like he hadn't been sleeping. He'd lost weight, and his usually neat hair was a mess. When I walked into the living room, he stood up but didn't come toward me. For the first time, he didn't make excuses. He admitted what he'd done was wrong. He said he'd been stressed about the wedding and the commitment it represented, and instead of talking to Lindsay about his fears, he'd made the worst possible choice. He told me he'd ended things with Amanda right after Lindsay broke up with him, but by then it was too late. He said he'd tried to get Lindsay back, promising counseling and complete transparency, but she wouldn't even consider it. Derek apologized for putting me in the middle of his mess. He said he never should have used me as his alibi or expected me to keep his secret. He also apologized for the nasty text he sent me. I listened to everything he had to say, but I didn't feel ready to forgive him yet. I told him I needed time and space. He nodded and said he understood. He hugged Mom goodbye but didn't try to hug me. After he left, Mom told me that she and Derek had had a long talk about Dad and how his actions had affected our family. She said Derek was starting to understand the magnitude of what he'd done, not just to Lindsay but to all of us. For the next couple of weeks, Derek kept his distance. He texted me once to say he was there if I wanted to talk, but otherwise respected my request for space. During this time, I got together with Lindsay for coffee. She seemed to be doing okay, considering everything. She'd found an apartment and was moving in the following week. She'd taken the engagement ring back to the jeweler and put the money toward her new place. Lindsay told me that Amanda had tried to continue things with Derek after she and Derek broke up, but he had refused. Apparently, Amanda had also lost several friends over this, as many of them felt she had betrayed Lindsay's trust. Lindsay had also heard that Derek was going to counseling to work through his issues. About 3 weeks after our talk, Derek invited Mom and me to dinner at a restaurant. Mom accepted for both of us. I was nervous about seeing him again, but I decided it was time to at least try to move forward. The dinner was awkward at first. We stuck to safe topics like work and school. But as the meal went on, things got a little easier. Derek seemed more like his old self, the person I remembered from before all this happened. At the end of the dinner, Derek handed me a letter. He asked me not to read it until I got home. When I opened it later that night, I found a long, handwritten apology. He wrote about how much he valued our relationship and how sorry he was for risking it. He said he was working on himself and hoped that someday I could trust him again. I didn't respond to the letter right away. I needed time to process everything. But a few days later, I texted him to say I'd read it and appreciated his honesty. Things are still not back to normal between us, and I don't know if they ever will be. But at least now we're talking again, taking small steps toward rebuilding our relationship. Final update, it has been 6 months since everything happened, and Derek and I have slowly been rebuilding our relationship. We started with short texts, then phone calls, and now we meet up about once a week. Usually, we go for walks or grab coffee. It's not the same as before, there's still a carefulness between us that wasn't there in the past. But it's getting better. Derek has continued with counseling. He told me it's helping him understand why he sabotaged his relationship with Lindsay. A lot of it goes back to Dad and the example he set. Derek realized he had unresolved issues about commitment and trust that he never dealt with. Lindsay is doing well. She's fully settled into her new apartment and even started dating someone new about a month ago. She and I still keep in touch, though not as often as before. There's no awkwardness between us, which I'm grateful for. She never blamed me for what happened, even though I was the one who told her about Derek's cheating. Amanda transferred to a different branch of the company, so Derek doesn't have to see her at work anymore. I don't know if she's seeing anyone new, and honestly, I don't care. Mom and Derek have fully reconciled. She was angry with him for a long time, but eventually, she forgave him. I think she understands better than anyone how people can make terrible mistakes. The hardest part for me has been realizing that people aren't all good or all bad. Derek was my hero for so long that seeing him fail so spectacularly forced me to reevaluate how I see people. He made a huge mistake, but that doesn't erase all the good things he's done or the person he's trying to become now. Last weekend, Derek and I went hiking at a state park near our house. It was something we used to do a lot before everything happened. As we were walking, Derek told me that he'd reached out to Dad recently. They had lunch together, and Derek apologized for judging him so harshly all these years. He said he still doesn't approve of what Dad did, but he understands now that people are complicated and make mistakes. I'm not sure I'm ready to have that kind of perspective about Dad yet. His leaving affected me differently than it affected Derek. But I respect that Derek is trying to make peace with his past. As for me, I'm doing okay. This whole experience forced me to grow up faster than I wanted to, but it also taught me about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I don't regret telling Lindsay the truth, despite how painful the aftermath was. I've also learned that healing isn't linear. Some days, I feel completely normal around Derek. Other days, something will remind me of what happened, and I'll feel that sense of betrayal all over again. But those moments are getting less frequent. Mom told me recently that she's proud of how I handled everything. She said it took courage to do what I did, and she hopes I never lose that. I don't know what the future holds for Derek or for our family. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. But we're all trying, one day at a time. And for now, that's enough. This will be my last update on this situation. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and support throughout this difficult time. You helped me navigate one of the hardest decisions of my life, and I'm grateful for that.